The black mail-order bride sits abandoned at the dusty station, clutching her carpetbag as the last woman is collected. Then a cowboy's son breaks free from his father's grip, runs straight to her trembling figure, and cries, "Mama, you came back!" Townsfolk sneer at another naive girl left high and dry, whispering she'll either beg for scraps or meet darker fates that befall stranded women. The weathered rancher chases after his boy, apologizing for the mistake, but his son's first smile in 2 years of grief stops him cold. This broken child might be the abandoned bride's only path to survival, yet her hidden past threatens to destroy the fragile hope she's sparked in a family still bleeding from loss. Will the rancher risk everything to protect the woman his son believes is his dead mother returned, or will her dangerous secrets tear apart the only sanctuary she's found? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The Montana Territory sun beat down mercilessly as Marble Hayes watched the last mail-order bride climb into a wagon beside her new husband. Her hands trembled around the handle of her worn carpetbag. 6 hours she had waited. 6 long hours at this dusty train station. Miles Dandridge had never come. The station master approached with sympathetic eyes but tired shoulders. He had seen this before. "Miss, the next eastbound train won't arrive for 3 days. You got somewhere to stay?" Marble counted the coins in her purse. 17 cents. Not enough for a hotel room. Barely enough for a single meal. "I'll manage," she whispered. The man shook his head and walked away. As evening shadows stretched across Copper Falls, Marble found herself on the station bench with nowhere else to go. She pulled her shawl tight against the mountain chill and tried to ignore the stares from passing townspeople. Their whispers followed her like smoke. Another one got fooled. Should have stayed back east where she belongs. Wonder what'll become of her now. Morning brought no relief. Marble's back ached from the hard bench. Her dress was wrinkled and dusty. The general store owner looked her up and down when she approached his counter. "You got money for those supplies?" She set down a small loaf of bread and a tin of crackers. Her 17 cents clinked on the wooden surface. "That's all I have." "Then that's all you get." He pushed the crackers back toward her. "Bread's 15 cents. Outside the store, Marble sat on the wooden steps and broke off small pieces of bread. She needed to make it last. The hotel owner had already made his position clear that morning. No money meant no room. His suggestion for alternative arrangements made her stomach turn. 3 well-dressed women emerged from the church across the street. Their eyes found Marble immediately. One pointed, another shook her head in disapproval. The third pulled her companions along, but not before Marble heard her words. Shameful. Sitting there like that in broad daylight. Marble closed her eyes. Back in Philadelphia, she had been somebody. The daughter of a respected shopkeeper, a teacher at the local school. When her father died and left her with nothing but debts, becoming a mail-order bride seemed like her only option for a respectable life. Now she was nobody. Across the dusty main street, a weathered man emerged from the bank with a young boy at his side. The child had been staring at Marble since she sat down. His father kept trying to redirect his attention, but the boy's gaze kept drifting back. "Come along, Eli. We need to get home." The boy planted his feet. His eyes never left Marble's face. "Papa, look at her." "Son, it's not polite to stare." But Eli Turner was no longer listening. Something in his 8-year-old mind had clicked into place. His grandmother's words echoed in his memory. Sometimes people we love come back to us when we need them most. Before Caleb Turner could react, his son broke free. Eli's boots pounded against the dirt as he ran across the street. Horses snorted and stepped aside. A wagon driver pulled his reins tight. The boy reached the store steps and threw his arms around Marble's waist. "Mama, you came back." Marble froze. The bread fell from her hands. Every person on the street stopped and stared. Caleb Turner rushed after his son, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Eli, no, let go." The boy looked up at Marble with tears streaming down his cheeks. "I knew you'd come back. Grandmama said you might." Marble's heart cracked. She had never seen such desperate hope in a child's eyes. Gently, she placed her hands on his shoulders. "Sweet boy, I think you have me confused with someone else." "Son, this lady isn't your mother." Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. "Your mother is in heaven, remember? Eli shook his head fiercely. She came back, just like Grandmama said she would. Caleb met Marbell's eyes. She saw exhaustion there, grief, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from carrying too much alone. I'm sorry, miss. He's been having a hard time since we lost his mother 2 years back. Sheriff Martha Colton approached from across the street. She was a sturdy woman in her 50s who had seen enough of the world to recognize trouble when it was brewing. Everything all right here, Caleb? Just a misunderstanding. Caleb gently pried his son's arms from around Marbell. Eli thought this lady was someone else. The sheriff studied Marbell. You're the one who came in on yesterday's train, the one whose intended never showed. Marbell nodded, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Shame, Sheriff Colton said. What's your plan now? I don't know. Eli twisted in his father's arms. She can come home with us, Papa, please. Son, that's not how things work. But Caleb Turner found himself looking at this woman again. Really looking. She had kind eyes, patient hands. When Eli had embraced her, she hadn't pushed him away or grown angry. She had been gentle. What did you do back east? He asked. I was a teacher before my father passed. A teacher. Caleb glanced at his son, who had barely spoken above a whisper for months until this moment. Eli's been struggling with his letters. Sheriff Colton raised an eyebrow. Caleb Turner, you better think careful about whatever's running through your head. My boy needs help. This lady needs work. Caleb's decision surprised even himself. Seems like it might benefit us both. Marbell's breath caught. You're offering me a position? Tutor and housekeeper, fair wages, respectable arrangement. Papa, yes. Eli's face lit up with the first genuine smile Caleb had seen since his wife's funeral. Sheriff Colton stepped closer. Folks around here won't take kindly to this arrangement. You know that. My son's happiness matters more than gossip. Marbell looked between the father and son. She thought of the empty train platform, the hotel owner's leering suggestion, the 17 cents in her purse. I accept. The Turner Ranch house stood like a monument to neglect. Dust coated every surface. Cobwebs draped the corners. Empty plates sat stacked beside a cold stove. Marbell set down her carpetbag and surveyed the chaos. It's been just the two of us, Caleb said quietly. I'm not much for housekeeping. Eli tugged at Marbell's skirt. This was Mama's favorite chair. She used to read to me there. The rocking chair sat untouched, a thin layer of dust covering its worn cushions. Marbell understood. This house was a shrine to grief. Well then, she said, rolling up her sleeves, we'll start there. Over the next 3 days, Marbell transformed the Turner home. She applied the same systematic approach her father had taught her for organizing his shop. Every item had a purpose and a place. She cleaned the rocking chair first, then sat Eli there for his first lesson. The boy stared at the primer in his lap. His previous tutor had left in frustration after 2 weeks. Eli could barely recognize simple words despite his obvious intelligence. I can't do it, he whispered. Marbell had seen this before. During her teaching days in Philadelphia, she had worked with children who struggled to learn through traditional methods. She remembered Marcus, the blacksmith's son who couldn't read until she discovered he learned through movement, and little Sarah, who needed pictures to make sense of words. Let's try something different. Marbell stood and walked to the fireplace. She picked up a piece of charcoal from the hearth. Close your eyes, Eli. Picture a horse. The boy's face relaxed. Horses he understood. Now watch. Marbell drew the shape of a horse on the wooden floor. Beneath it, she wrote H-O-R-S-E in large, clear letters. Clear. The word looks like what it means. Eli's eyes widened. The letters make a horse? They make the idea of a horse. Just like your father's horses carry people places, words carry ideas. For the first time in months, Eli laughed. By the end of the week, he was reading simple sentences. By the end of the month, he was devouring every book Marbell could find. She had turned learning into a game, and Eli couldn't get enough. Caleb noticed the change immediately. His son talked at dinner now, asked questions, smiled without being prompted. The house hummed with life again. How did you do it? Caleb asked one evening after Eli had gone to bed. Every child learns differently. I just had to find his way. Marbell had learned this approach during her father's long illness. Customers would bring their children to the shop while conducting business. She had entertained them with stories and simple lessons, discovering that each child's mind worked like a unique puzzle. The previous tutor said he was slow. He's brilliant. He just needed someone to see it. Caleb studied Marbell's face in the lamplight. Where did you learn to teach like that? My father's shop. Children would come with their parents. I started teaching them while the adults talked business. Some couldn't sit still for regular lessons, so I found other ways. And it worked? Every time. As autumn settled over the ranch, Marbell's influence spread beyond the schoolroom. She noticed Caleb's struggles with a particularly stubborn mare. The horse reared and snorted whenever anyone approached with a saddle. She's been like that since the storm, Caleb explained. Lightning spooked her bad. Haven't been able to ride her since. Marbell watched from the fence rail. The mare's behavior reminded her of Eli when he first tried to read, fear masquerading as defiance. May I try something? Caleb looked skeptical, but stepped back. Marbell entered the corral slowly. Instead of approaching with the saddle, she sat down in the dirt. The mare stopped snorting and tilted her head. Marbell began humming a soft melody her father used to sing when she was frightened during thunderstorms. The horse took one step closer, then another. How did you know to do that? Same way I knew how to reach Eli. Fear looks the same whether it's a child or a horse. By winter, the mare was riding again. Word spread to neighboring ranches. Caleb Turner's new housekeeper had a gift with difficult horses. Men brought their problem animals to the ranch, and Marbell helped train them using patience and observation instead of force. But not everyone in Copper Falls appreciated the changes at the Turner Ranch. It's not proper, Mrs. Henderson told her husband at the general store. An unmarried woman living out there with a widower. That boy's never been happier, the store owner replied. Still not proper. The whispers followed Marbell to town. Some customers at the store turned away when she approached the counter. A few church ladies crossed the street to avoid passing her on the sidewalk. Sheriff Colton watched it all with growing concern. Folks are talking, Caleb. Let them talk. It's not just talk anymore. Some are saying you should send her away. That evening, Marbell found a telegram waiting at the post office. Her hands shook as she read the brief message. Found your location. Coming soon. M.D. Miles Dandridge had not forgotten about her. She folded the telegram and slipped it into her pocket. Caleb and Eli were finally healing. She would not let her past destroy their progress. But 3 days later, another telegram arrived. Prepare for my arrival. You belong to me. M.D. Then a third. I own your passage west. You will honor our arrangement. Marbell began looking over her shoulder whenever she went to town. Every stranger's face made her pulse quicken. She jumped at unexpected sounds and struggled to focus during Eli's lessons. Miss Marbell, are you sick? Eli asked during a particularly distracted afternoon. I'm fine, sweet boy. But Caleb noticed the change. Her laughter came less frequently. She startled when he entered a room. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Something's wrong, he told Sheriff Colton. What kind of wrong? She's scared of something or someone. That evening, a stranger arrived in Copper Falls asking questions at the hotel. He described a colored woman traveling alone, wanted to know where she might be staying. The hotel owner pointed him toward the Turner Ranch. Miles Dandridge had come to collect what he believed was his. The general store fell silent when Marbell entered. 3 women clustered near the fabric display stopped their conversation mid-sentence. Their eyes followed her every movement as she approached the counter with her shopping list. We're all out of flour, all out of, the store owner said without checking his shelves. Marbell could see 2 full sacks behind him. What about sugar? Fresh out. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward from the fabric display. Perhaps you should shop elsewhere. This is the only general store in town. Then perhaps you should consider living elsewhere. The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Marbell straightened her shoulders and met Mrs. Henderson's gaze directly. I live where I'm welcomed. The Turner family welcomes me. Decent folks don't approve of your arrangement out there. Decent folks mind their own business. Marbell left the store empty-handed, but with her dignity intact. She had learned this strength during her father's final months, when creditors came calling and neighbors whispered about their mounting debts. Standing tall in the face of judgment was a skill born from necessity. Sheriff Colton was waiting by her wagon. Saw what happened in there. I can handle small-minded people. It's not just them anymore, Marbell. Pressure's building. Some folks want you gone. That afternoon, Marbell returned to the ranch to find Eli waiting by the gate. His school clothes were torn and dirt streaked his face. What happened? Tommy Miller said you weren't my real mama. Said you were just playing pretend. Eli's hands were scraped raw. The other boy clearly hadn't escaped the encounter unscathed. What did you tell him? I said you're the best not mama a boy could have, and if he said mean things about you again, I'd give him another black eye. Marbell knelt beside him. Fighting doesn't solve problems, Eli. Papa says sometimes a man has to stand up for what matters. Your papa's right, but there are different ways to stand up. That evening, Caleb came home earlier than usual. He found Marbell and Eli reading in the parlor, the picture of domestic peace, but he could see the tension in Marbell's shoulders, the way she glanced toward the windows when the wind rattled the shutters. We need to talk, he said after Eli went to bed. About what? About whatever's got you jumping at shadows. Marbell set down her mending. For weeks she had carried the burden of Miles's threats alone. The weight was becoming unbearable. There's something I haven't told you about Miles Dandridge. The man who was supposed to marry you? He's been sending telegrams. Threatening ones. Caleb's jaw tightened. What kind of threats? He says I belong to him, that he owns my passage west. He's coming here. When? Soon. Caleb stood and walked to the window. Outside, the November wind bent the bare trees like arthritic fingers. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you and Eli were finally happy. I didn't want my troubles to destroy that. Your troubles are our troubles now. The words settled between them like a promise. Marbell felt something shift in her chest. For the first time since her father died, someone was willing to stand beside her instead of behind her. There's more, she said quietly. Tell me. I think he's already here. A stranger was asking questions in town yesterday. Caleb turned from the window. Description? Well-dressed? Eastern clothes? Looking for a colored woman traveling alone? That's him. 3 days later, Miles Dandridge rode up to the Turner Ranch just as the sun touched the horizon. He was exactly as Marbell remembered. Perfectly groomed, expensively dressed, cold eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. Marbell watched from the kitchen window as he dismounted. Her hands trembled as she untied her apron. Stay inside, Caleb said. This is my fight. Not anymore. But before either could move, Eli burst through the front door. He had been playing in the barn and came running at the sound of hoofbeats. Papa, there's a fancy man here. Miles's eyes found Marbell through the window. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Marbell Hayes, he called out. Time to honor our agreement. Caleb stepped onto the porch. You're on private property. I'm here for what belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you. Miles pulled a folded paper from his coat. This contract says otherwise. Miss Hayes owes me for transportation, lodging, and services rendered. What services? I brought her west to be my wife. Then where were you when she arrived? Miles's smile never wavered. Delayed by business, but I'm here now to collect. Marbell stepped onto the porch. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to walk forward. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. This contract is legally binding. A marriage contract with a man who never intended to marry me? Miles's eyes flickered. Who says I never intended marriage? Your wife might have something to say about that. The words came out before Marbell could stop them. She had suspected the truth from his delayed arrival and evasive letters. Now his expression confirmed it. Careful, Marbell. Accusations can damage a person's reputation. So can abandonment. Eli moved closer to Marbell, sensing danger he didn't understand. Miles noticed the boy's protective gesture. Interesting family you've assembled here. Shame if something were to threaten it. Caleb's hand moved to his rifle. You need to leave. I'll leave when Miss Hayes comes with me. Otherwise, this whole territory will know exactly what kind of woman you've been harboring. The threat hung in the air like storm clouds. Miles remounted his horse. I'll be at the hotel tonight. Tomorrow, Marbell. You come with me willingly, or I make sure everyone knows the truth about your improper arrangements here." He rode away, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and impending destruction. That night, Marbell barely slept. She sat by her bedroom window, watching shadows dance across the yard. Every sound made her heart race: a branch scraping against the house, an owl calling from the barn, the wind rattling loose shutters. Miles Dandridge was out there somewhere, planning her destruction. Morning brought no relief. At breakfast, Eli chattered about his lessons while Caleb sat silent and brooding. Marble pushed eggs around her plate, her appetite gone. "Miss Marble, are you sad?" Eli asked. "Just tired, sweet boy." But Eli was too perceptive. He had inherited his father's ability to read people's moods. Something was wrong, and it scared him. After Eli left for school, Caleb confronted Marbell directly. "Tell me everything about Miles Dandridge. No more secrets." Marbell took a shaky breath. "We corresponded for 3 months. His letters were charming but vague. Always talked about his business ventures, but never specifics." "What kind of business?" "He said he helped women find opportunities in the West. Good marriages. Respectable positions. Sounds like he makes a living off desperate people." "I was desperate. My father left debts I couldn't pay. The school let me go when parents complained about having a colored teacher. Miles seemed like my only option." Caleb's expression darkened. "You think there were others?" "His letters mentioned helping many women. I thought he was being charitable." A horrible picture was forming in Caleb's mind. Miles Dandridge wasn't just a failed suitor. He was something much worse. That afternoon, Sheriff Colton arrived at the ranch with grim news. "Talk to the hotel owner. Your Mr. Dandridge has been asking a lot of questions." "What kind of questions?" "About you, Marbell. About your arrangement here. About Caleb's finances and property holdings." "He's gathering information," Marbell said quietly. "For what?" "To destroy us." Sheriff Colton removed her hat and sat heavily in the kitchen chair. "There's more. Got a wire from the sheriff in Denver. Miles Dandridge is wanted for questioning in connection with several missing women." The blood drained from Marbell's face. "Missing?" "Women who answered his marriage advertisements, came west and disappeared." "They're not missing," Marbell whispered. "They're trapped." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Miles never intended to marry the women he contacted. He brought them west with promises of marriage, then used their isolation and desperation to force them into unpaid labor. "He has a wife," Marbell continued. "She probably runs some kind of boarding house or laundry. The women work without wages because they have nowhere else to go." "That's slavery with extra steps," Caleb said grimly. "It's brilliant," Sheriff Colton admitted. "The women come willingly. They pay their own transportation. By the time they realize the truth, they're hundreds of miles from home with no money and no options." "Except I got away," Marbell said, "because Miles never showed up to collect you. So now he's here to finish what he started." As if summoned by their conversation, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Miles Dandridge had returned, this time with a companion. The second man was older, dressed in a judge's robes, and carried an official-looking document case. "Judge Morrison," Sheriff Colton muttered, "this isn't good." The men dismounted and approached the house with purpose. Miles wore his predatory smile. Judge Morrison looked uncomfortable but determined. "Sheriff Colton," Judge Morrison called out, "I need to speak with you about a legal matter." They gathered in the front yard under the pale autumn sun. Eli was still at school, sparing him from whatever was about to unfold. "Miss Hayes," Miles said smoothly, "I trust you've had time to reconsider my offer." "It wasn't an offer. It was a threat. I prefer to think of it as clarification." Judge Morrison opened his document case with obvious reluctance. "I've been asked to review a breach of contract case." "What contract?" Caleb demanded. Miles produced the same paper he had shown the day before. "Miss Hayes agreed to marry me in exchange for transportation and lodging. She has violated that agreement by living in sin with another man." "We're not living in sin," Marbell protested. "Unmarried woman, unmarried man, same household. The appearance of impropriety is sufficient for breach of contract." Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "The contract appears legally binding." It's fraud, Caleb said. Prove it. Miles stepped closer to Marbell. Come with me now, and we can settle this matter quietly. Refuse, and I'll make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what kind of woman you are. What kind of woman am I? The kind who seduces grieving widowers, who corrupts innocent children, who spreads her legs for room and board. The words hit Marbell like physical blows. She had heard worse during her father's illness, when creditors assumed the worst about a young woman trying to pay debts. But hearing them here, in front of Caleb, made her want to disappear. That's enough. Caleb stepped forward. Is it? Because I haven't told them about your wife yet. Caleb froze. What about my wife? Eleanor Turner. Died in childbirth 2 years ago. Tragic story. But I wonder what she'd think about you replacing her so quickly with hired help. Don't you dare speak about Eleanor. Why not? She was a good woman, a proper wife. Everything Miss Hayes is not. Miles was enjoying himself now. He had found Caleb's weakness and was twisting the knife. Eleanor would be ashamed of what you've done to her memory. Something snapped in Caleb's chest. Rage flooded his vision. His hands clenched into fists, but before he could move, a small voice cut through the tension. Papa? Eli stood at the edge of the yard, school satchel in hand. He had heard every word. Miles smiled at the boy with false warmth. You must be Eli. I've heard so much about you. Eli moved protectively toward Marbell. Are you the bad man? Bad man? Who told you I was bad? Nobody had to tell me. I can see it in your eyes. Miles's smile faltered. Even an 8-year-old could recognize the predator beneath his polished exterior. Your Miss Marbell is coming with me, boy. Back where she belongs. She belongs here, Eli said firmly. Says who? Says me and Papa. And anybody with eyes can see she's family. Miles reached out and grabbed Marbell's arm. Enough of this foolishness. The moment his fingers closed around her wrist, everything changed. Marbell felt Miles's fingers dig into her wrist like iron clamps. For a moment she was back in Philadelphia, frozen by creditors who spoke to her like she was property to be collected. The old fear rose in her throat. Then she heard Eli gasp. The sound broke through her paralysis like lightning through darkness. This child had run to her when the whole world seemed empty. He had called her Mama when his own heart was shattered. He believed she was strong. She would not let him watch her crumble. Remove your hand, Marbell said, her voice cutting through the yard like a blade. It was the same tone she had used with disruptive students back in Philadelphia, the voice that could silence a rowdy classroom with 3 words. Authority earned through respect, not fear. Miles's grip tightened. You don't give me orders. I said remove your hand. This time her voice carried the weight of every lesson she had taught, every small victory with struggling children, every horse she had gentled through patience instead of force. She was no longer the abandoned woman from the train station. Let go of her. Caleb stepped forward, but Marbell raised her free hand to stop him. This was her fight now. Sheriff Colton, she said without taking her eyes off Miles. Are you familiar with the Married Women's Property Act? Some. Then you know that even if this contract were valid, which it is not, I retain the right to refuse marriage to a man who has misrepresented himself. Miles's confident smile wavered slightly. Misrepresented how? You claim to be unmarried, you're not. Judge Morrison looked up sharply. Is this true? Irrelevant, Miles said quickly. Quite relevant, Marbell continued. Bigamy is illegal in every territory. A marriage contract with an already married man is void by definition. She had learned about property law during her father's final illness, when lawyers circled like vultures, knowledge gained in desperation but retained with purpose. You have no proof of my marital status, Miles said. Don't I? Marbell reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a telegram. Not one of the threatening messages Miles had sent, but one she had requested from Philadelphia. Sheriff Colton, would you read this aloud? The sheriff unfolded the paper. Wire from Philadelphia City Records Office. Miles Dandridge married to one Catherine Fitzgerald Dandridge, June 15, 1881. Marriage currently valid and recorded. Miles's face flushed red. That doesn't prove anything. It proves you're a liar, Eli said from beside Marbell. It proves more than that, Sheriff Colton added grimly. She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket. Got this wire from Denver this morning. Miles Dandridge, you're wanted for questioning in connection with human trafficking. The words hit the gathered group like a thunderclap. That's preposterous, Miles sputtered. 5 women, Sheriff Colton continued reading. All answered marriage advertisements. All disappeared after traveling west to meet their intended husbands. All the advertisements traced back to you. Judge Morrison stepped away from Miles instinctively. Is this true? Lies and speculation. The Denver sheriff has testimony from 2 women who escaped your operation, Sheriff Colton said. Forced labor, withheld wages, threats of violence for anyone who tried to leave. Marbell felt the pieces clicking together. That's why you never came to collect me. You were busy with other women. I had business to attend to. You had victims to manage. Miles's composure finally cracked. You ungrateful witch. I gave you an opportunity for a better life. You gave me a lie wrapped in false promises. You would have been fed and housed, as a slave, as an employee with room and board, without wages, without freedom, without choice. The conversation had drawn attention. Neighbors emerged from their houses to watch the confrontation. Mrs. Henderson stood on her porch, hand pressed to her throat. The store owner had closed his shop to listen. These people don't want you here anyway, Miles said desperately. Look at how they treat you. Come with me and at least you'll have purpose. I have purpose here. Playing house with a widower and his brat? Caleb's restraint finally snapped. He stepped forward, but Marbell's voice stopped him cold. That widower is twice the man you'll ever be, and that boy has more courage in his little finger than you have in your entire body. She turned to face the gathered crowd. This man tried to trick me into slavery. He's done it to other women. He preys on desperation and loneliness. Her voice carried across the yard, reaching every ear. But I'm not desperate anymore. I have work that matters, a family that chose me, a community that's learning to accept me. Mrs. Henderson shifted uncomfortably on her porch. I won't be taken by threats or lies or legal papers signed under false pretenses. Sheriff Colton moved closer to Miles. You're under arrest for fraud and suspicion of human trafficking. You can't arrest me. I'm a businessman. You're a criminal. Caleb stepped beside Marbell, his presence solid and reassuring. She's not going anywhere with you. She has no choice. Yes, I do, Marbell said firmly, and I choose to stay here, with people who see my worth instead of trying to steal it. Miles made one last desperate grab for her arm, but Sheriff Colton caught his wrist. That's assault, she said calmly, adding it to the charges. As the sheriff led Miles away in handcuffs, he turned back toward Marbell with pure hatred in his eyes. This isn't over. There are others like me. You'll never be safe. Maybe not, Marbell replied. But I'll never be alone again either. The crowd began to disperse, but many lingered. They had seen something unexpected, a woman standing up to a powerful man, truth defeating deception, courage overcoming fear. Judge Morrison approached Marbell with obvious embarrassment. I owe you an apology. I should have examined that contract more carefully. You should have, but you didn't because you saw a colored woman and assumed the worst. The judge flinched. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. Be better next time. As the yard emptied, only the Turner family remained. Caleb, Marbell, and Eli stood together in the fading light, forever changed by what had just occurred. Is the bad man gone forever? Eli asked. Yes, sweet boy. He's gone. Good. Now can we have dinner? I'm starving. Marbell laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. She was free. Truly free. For the first time since her father died, she belonged somewhere. That evening, as twilight painted the sky purple and gold, Caleb found Marbell sitting on the porch steps. She stared across the rolling pasture where his horses grazed peacefully. The confrontation with Miles felt like a dream now, but the relief was real. You were magnificent today, he said, settling beside her. I was terrified. Couldn't tell. You faced him down like a lioness protecting her cubs. Marbell smiled at that. Eli is worth protecting. So are you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Caleb had been thinking about this moment for weeks, maybe months, watching Marbell transform his broken household into a home, seeing his son laugh again, feeling his own heart slowly thaw from 2 years of frozen grief. "Marble, I need to ask you something." She turned to face him, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "When Miles said those things about Eleanor, about replacing her memory, it made me think. Caleb, you don't need to explain anything to me." "Yes, I do. Because I want you to understand something important." He took her hands in his, calloused from ranch work, but gentle as always. "Eleanor was my first love, the mother of my son. Nothing will ever change that." Marble's heart sank slightly, but she nodded. "But you're not replacing her. You're something entirely different. You're my second chance. My opportunity to love again without forgetting what came before." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Marbell Hayes. Not because you remind me of Eleanor, but because you're uniquely, wonderfully you." Before she could respond, the front door burst open, and Eli tumbled onto the porch. "Are you asking her to marry us, Papa?" Caleb laughed, despite the serious moment. "Subtlety isn't your strong suit, son. Mrs. Henderson says when grown-ups hold hands and look all mushy, somebody's about to get married. Mrs. Henderson talks too much." Eli plopped down between them, effectively ending any romantic atmosphere. "So are you going to marry us or not, Miss Marble?" Marble looked between father and son, two faces filled with hope and love and the promise of belonging. 6 months ago she had been abandoned at a train station with 17 cents and no prospects. Now she had a choice to make that would determine the rest of her life. "Well," she said slowly, "I suppose somebody has to keep you Turner men in line." Eli whooped with joy and threw his arms around her neck. Over his shoulder she met Caleb's eyes and saw her own happiness reflected there. 3 weeks later, the entire town of Copper Falls gathered at the small wooden church for the wedding of Caleb Turner and Marble Hayes. The same townspeople who had whispered behind their hands now brought covered dishes and wedding gifts. Sheriff Colton had spread word about Miles Dandridge's arrest and the trafficking ring he operated. The story painted Marbell as a victim who had escaped a terrible fate, then found the courage to expose the truth. Public opinion shifted overnight from suspicion to admiration. Mrs. Henderson even apologized, in her own backward way. "I suppose we misjudged the situation," she admitted while arranging flowers at the altar. "You suppose correctly?" Marble replied with gracious firmness. The ceremony was simple but perfect. Judge Morrison, seeking to redeem himself after his earlier failure, performed the service with genuine warmth. He had spent considerable time researching the legal precedents Marbell had cited, educating himself on laws he should have known. Eli served as both ring-bearer and the one to give Marbell away, a role he took with utmost seriousness. He had practiced walking slowly for days, determined not to trip on his too long pants. When Judge Morrison asked if anyone objected to the union, Eli stood up in the front pew. "I object to calling her Miss Marble anymore. From now on, she's my mama." Laughter rippled through the congregation. Even Judge Morrison smiled. "Duly noted, young man. You may now kiss your new mother." Eli bounded up to the altar and planted a loud kiss on Marbell's cheek, drawing more laughter and a few tears from the assembled guests. The reception was held in the Turner Ranch yard under strings of lanterns Marble had made from mason jars and candles. The same neighbors who once shunned her now praised her apple pies and asked for her secret to training difficult horses. As evening settled over the celebration, Marbell found herself standing in the same spot where Miles Dandridge had grabbed her arm 3 weeks earlier. But instead of fear, she felt only gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. Sheriff Colton approached with news from Denver. Miles Dandridge confessed to everything: trafficking, fraud, forgery. He'll spend the next 15 years in territorial prison. What about the other women? 5 of them have been found and returned to their families. 2 more are still missing, but we have leads. And his wife? Claims she knew nothing about the trafficking. Might be true. Dandridge kept his operations separate from his home life. Marbell nodded, satisfied that justice had been served. As the last guests departed and the lanterns flickered low, the Turner family stood together in their yard. Marbell wore her simple wedding dress, a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Caleb had traded his work clothes for a borrowed suit that was slightly too small. Eli had somehow managed to keep his shirt clean through the entire celebration. "Are we really a family now?" Eli asked, suddenly serious. "We've been a family for months," Caleb said. "Today just made it official." "Good, because I was getting tired of explaining why my mama didn't have the same last name as us." Marbell laughed and pulled him close. "Well, now we're all Turners." "The Turner family," Eli said, testing the words. "I like how that sounds." As they walked toward the house together, Marbell thought about the strange path that had led her here. A failed mail-order bride arrangement had become the greatest blessing of her life. An abandoned woman had found her true home. A child's mistake had revealed a deeper truth about love and belonging. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than any other bond. Sometimes being lost is the first step toward being found. And sometimes a small boy's simple faith can change everything. The Turner family disappeared into their house, three hearts finally whole, ready to write the next chapter of their chosen love story together.